The argument isn't so much that conservatives never get banned. Of course they get banned.
Yes.
The argument is more or less that it's not because they are conservative. And my argument for that is that when you look at the top performing pages on like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all these different multiple social media sites, conservatives dominate on those platforms. Their news usually spreads faster. Their engagements are usually higher. Even like there are even studies showing the way the algorithm on YouTube works. It's more likely to put out far left or far right content rather than the like middle of the road centrist kind of stuff, because it's that sensationalism that sells. So there's really not a lot of proof that like conservative ideas are being censored, unless of course that conservative idea coincides with a violation of TOS, like, I don't know, race and IQ or some shit. Like usually more or less it seems to be that it's the conservatives that are breaking the rules and violating the TOS. And I know that that's such a controversial opinion, but it is always funny to me too, because the conservatives get so mad. But whenever we talk about issues with like the black community, right away it's take personal responsibility for your actions, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. It's on you. You can change your own behavior. But then when we're on social media sites and they can't like say the N-word or say that trans people aren't human, all of a sudden it's like a big like victim.
I was gonna say
victim game.
It seemed kind of funny because it's like you're making the black crime argument for conservatives on the internet, like, well, they're breaking the rules more, so that's why.
And I've actually argued with conservatives that would say, well, if you don't want to be a victim of police brutality, just comply and follow the law, but then they won't say the same thing about the TOS. Well, it's like a really it's a fundamental hypocrisy.
Well, the TOS is slanted against them though, because they're like, you can't say they can't make their arguments without
that's not true.
Well, it being categorized as breaking TOS.
I mean,
they can't make their arguments. They can't make their arguments in the trans debate without technically breaking the TOS.
I would completely disagree with that. I mean, maybe if they're repeatedly like misgendering to the point of harassment, then maybe not. But conservatives, let's think here about the main conservative sources. We see the main conservative talking heads, like they are always giving their opinion on trans people. Ben Shapiro, he talks about trans people all the time.
When you're talking about conservatives like blowing up, immediately I think of Ben Shapiro, who has a giant show, but also Steven Crowder's show. I mean, he's constantly dealing with YouTube and potentially getting banned.
And that's because he's constantly violating the TOS.
But he doesn't. He has a comedy show though, so I mean, where he's running into trouble with the TOS is like, I'm assuming doing jokes and stuff.
The clip he got in trouble for was pretty awful. I
mean, what was the clip? I don't know.
It was the black farmer clip where they were doing the really negative racial stereotypes.
Oh,
like black farmer.
You know how I feel about racial stereotypes.
I know.
So fuck Steven. Fuck Steven.
The thing is
Crowder.
I don't think we can fairly say, well, it was just a joke, bro, because yes, Steven Crowder does joke, but sometimes he uses those jokes, I think, to further ideas and to break the TOS. For example, he just dropped a clip. I just saw a clip where he was saying that gay people are more predatory and should be kept away from children. Like Steven Crowder gets away with so much. The amount of times that he's violated the TOS, it's actually surprising he hasn't been banned yet. Like, they're giving him so much leeway here.
Well, I think he's been banned a couple times and he's like
he lost his monetization, but he's with the syndicated Blaze, so he's fine. Right. But it's just no, he hasn't been banned, I don't think. He's had a couple videos maybe taken down, and he's lost his monetization.
Well, here's, I think, the problem that Adam was trying to bring forth is like with the trans issue. I mean, I don't watch Ben Shapiro enough, so I don't know what his exact position on transgender people is. But if someone says like, oh, I think transgenderism is a lie, I don't think gender dysphoria exists, I think these are just people tricking children into transitioning or whatever, they have some opinion like this. I mean, it's very easy for someone to say, well, that's violating the TOS. You're dehumanizing,
targeting groups.
I mean, you can look at the TOS. People talk a lot about it being super vague, but usually when you look it over, it's not that hard to understand and follow the TOS. As long as, you're not engaging in some kind of dehumanizing behavior, you're usually going to be fine.
But
Yeah, but
my
don't you
point is
agree?
the
Well,
argument
hold on,
is
hold on. Don't
framed
you
as dehumanizing people.
right? Exactly. Don't you agree that if someone were to say, they don't believe trans people should be a thing, that's dehumanizing
I
by
mean,
their
yeah,
nature, right?
that might arguably violate TOS. What do you mean trans people shouldn't be a thing? Like they shouldn't exist? Because if
Yeah,
you
if
tweeted
someone
that,
said,
then yeah,
yeah,
that'd probably
exactly,
be a
right.
violation.
Yeah, not. I would
I mean, think about
assume.
like, would you want people tweeting out like white people shouldn't exist? Like, I think that would
I
be pretty
don't want
fucking
them to
bad.
tweet
Yeah, I
that,
know, not at all.
but I don't think they should
I
be
don't.
banned from. I mean, first of all, the people do tweet that out, but I don't think they should be banned
Yeah.
necessarily from Twitter
But
for
here's
tweeting
the
that
thing.
out.
Well, so there's multiple things. Is one, I would have to have a little bit more like evidence that is being used to discriminate specifically against conservatives. Usually, again, it does seem that it's the conservatives that are violating the rules. And when we're talking about the overall algorithm and the way it promotes conservative content, they're not being censored like systemically at all or on an algorithmic bias. Some of the rules, if you want to argue that conservatives are dehumanizing trans people or black people more often, then yeah, they might get banned more often. But again, we see how conservatives thrive on these platforms when they do abide by the standards. Like again, you can look at the overall. I mean, I don't have these off the top of my head. If you want me, I can. Want me to?
No,
I can
I
literally
and
send
I
you the
could
article.
definitely see. I agree with you. We've talked about this. That conservatives are probably going to do better on internet and social media stuff because the mainstream media has, there's more left-wing people in the mainstream media. So people who are on the right are always looking for additional content to supplement that, and they're
That
going to
might
find it on YouTube.
more or less, maybe, but at the same time, if you want to look at like overall viewership, Fox News dominates in like every aspect also.
Right, but if you
Because it's one
combined
network.
MSNBC
Yeah.
and CNN
But
and all
this is
the
the
other
same.
ones,
So
it's the
there's
same
always
thing.
an excuse for it, though, right? So like,
No.
No,
I'm not
wait.
making.
It's an
hold
argument.
on.
It's
No,
not
no,
an
wait, hold on,
excuse.
hold on. Yeah, I'm not making an excuse. I'm just saying the reason Fox News gets the best ratings is because they're the only conservative mainstream news channel. So all the conservatives are going to watch it. Where if you're on the left or a liberal, you have a lot more variety, and that's going to kind of like split the vote, per se.
Yes.
okay, so what would that actually prove, though?
Oh no, I was just explaining why I think conservatives and why I think socialists dominate on alternative media like YouTube, Twitch, etc. is because people who don't find their opinions represented by mainstream media are going to look for alternate avenues to find the voice that they agree with. And I think conservatives, at least at the moment, feel more like socialists, feel like their opinions aren't being represented by the mainstream. And that's why
I mean,
they have kind of this
that could very
domination.
well. Yeah, I think that very well could play a role in the popularity of conservatives. But again, that would still play right into what I'm saying is that there's no real algorithmic bias then because those conservatives are able to get on their social media, find
Right.
conservative content, and then the algorithm continues to feed them more of that conservative content if it keeps them on the platform.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's an algorithmic bias. I think the algorithm, as you said, it's just promoting whatever is controversial, what gets clicks, all that stuff. I do
Right.
think where the issue arises from is that since the culture right now, at least the mainstream culture, seems to be a lot more on the side of the left or the woke or whatever you want to call it, it's easier for conservatives to stray outside the bounds of quote unquote what is acceptable and thus violate the TOS.
Okay, maybe, yeah. That's completely possible, sure. I just think that it's still, I mean, so they're still violating TOS, right? They're still violating TOS.
Right, but their
more
argument
often.
would be they just don't agree that the TOS
playing
should be
field is
framed the way it
tipped.
is.
Yeah.
Well, then that would be an entirely different discussion because if we've moved past from
Well, that is the discussion, though.
If
That
the
is totally
discussion is should there be a TOS, then that's an entirely different discussion.
Well, there
on
should
whether
be. They just disagree with the specifics of it.
There should be
okay,
a TOS,
then yeah, then I
definitely.
would literally say that that's a different argument from the conservative censorship argument. Now you're arguing about should a private company be able to enforce a TOS, which I would say yes, of course. So yeah.
Okay, I don't know. I don't remember how we got off on conservative censorship, but
I enjoy the conversation. I would be more than happy to if you want, I can put it in I don't know, your chat or whatever. I can go ahead and send you the statistics and you can see
Mark Ludwig, I don't know if you know his stuff, but he did kind of a statistical analysis of YouTube and like how YouTube channels different suggestions and stuff like that, and came to the conclusion that it was really reversed. More people were led towards actually not reversed politically, but more led towards mainstream content. So if they were interested in conservative stuff, they'd be led to Fox News, and if they were interested in liberal stuff, they'd be led to MSNBC rather than
which makes sense. That makes sense too, because YouTube does I think if you're depending on like certain issues that you're searching for, they will make it so that there's like a what they call like an authoritative news source, like a syndicated news source, like that comes up first. So yeah, I mean, you could definitely see, you'll probably see a little boost in some of those in those sources as well. Yeah, sure.
I mean, I think that's the real censorship, the real bias is ever since the whole, PewDiePie saying the N-word, and, in England, when there was some bullshit fake controversy about how like, oh, there were these terrorist ISIS videos that had ads on them, and created the adpocalypse nonsense. Is that ever since the adpocalypse, basically the mainstream media has been bullying YouTube into forcing them to prioritize mainstream media sources. I mean, to me, that's the real censorship issue that people should be kind of focusing on.
I mean, when you say bullying, that sounds pretty loaded. I would have to look in to see a little bit more, but I definitely agree that there have been times that mainstream media has pressured YouTube. I think what happened with the whole
well, what's the difference between bullying and pressuring? I mean,
well, I mean,
has a
bullying
negative connotation, right?
I guess, yeah, maybe it's not that. Maybe it's more of a semantic thing, actually. But either way, I would agree with you more or less that, like we saw, like the Wall Street Journal. I definitely think they were trying to like undermine some stuff with YouTube there.
Oh, definitely.
With the whole like adpocalypse thing. I thought that was I still remember thinking that was so stupid, because it was like, help me remember what it was. Weren't they saying there were ads running on like terrorist videos?
Yeah, there was.
That was totally.
I did 2 videos on this way back when I made videos, much to my audience's dismay. No, there was. It was funny because Rupert Murdoch owns both the Wall Street Journal and the UK Times, and at oh my god, the same time period. That's Rupert Murdoch. The same time period was the PewDiePie was a Nazi thing that the Wall Street Journal ran, and then in the UK there was some ISIS ad that had like ISIS video that had, I don't know, like 2,000 views. Like no one ever saw this video, and it had some Coca-Cola ad on it. And the UK Times blew it up and said, look, YouTube is putting ads on terrorist videos. And they kind of had like a series of articles about this. And then this caused all the advertisers to basically, who wanted to renegotiate with YouTube already, it gave them the leverage to basically bitch at YouTube about changing the, giving them better rates and stuff. And then if you remember, subsequently after that, we had years of just article after article about how YouTube was radicalizing people and, promoting fake news and blah, blah, blah. And that's kind of what I'm referring to when I say they're basically bullying YouTube into forcing them to have these quote unquote authoritative sources.
I mean, maybe, yeah, I would have to look and see again if there's like the direct connection there. I know that later on, it was not that long ago that they said they were going to start making sure that there were like authoritative syndicated sources when you're searching stuff for like vaccines or COVID or something to make to like reduce the spread of misinfo. So, I mean, I think that that's more or less okay.
They do it with anything that becomes a quote unquote like breaking news story. Like I remember this was a very interesting example, was the day that Joe Biden announced that he was running for president. You couldn't, if you looked at the name of his campaign ad and you typed into YouTube, you couldn't find his official YouTube channel with his official video. It would just send you to mainstream news sources commenting on his video. You couldn't find it because of this, the way the algorithm was set up.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just, and this is what Adam was talking about with Mark Ludwig, was that it was showing how after this change occurred, YouTube was prioritizing sending people to mainstream sources, which I don't know. I don't think that's right.
Yeah,
I don't think that should be YouTube's priority.